Okay.
Hi, I'm here with Ron Scharf. We're in Missoula, Montana. It's December 18th, 2003, and we're doing a local show on MCAT. We want to thank everybody for being so helpful and so professional. It's a wonderful studio, and I hope in Missoula that you enjoy it. Hi, Ron.
How you doing here?
Good.
Okay, old buddy.
Thanks for coming out and for taking your time out during the busy holidays to come in for a little visit.
Not a problem, not a problem. My pleasure.
Good. Well, I met Ron upstairs at the Vet Center, and we've just been kind of working together for a few weeks now, just kind of talking about things. And those guys, the rest of the guys that I was with are all Vietnam veterans. And so we were really surprised when we found out that we had a veteran from World War II. And of course, as you can tell from looking at Ron, he's kept himself in good shape ever since that time. And I asked Ron if he wanted to come in and kind of talk about his experiences before the war and during the war, and some experiences that he's had after, because I found it to be very, very interesting. And Ron is a good guy to get to know, and I think you're going to really enjoy some of the stuff that he has to talk about.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. This is kind of like, this is your life, Rondo.
This is your life, Rondo.
That's what they used to call me in the fire department back in Chicago. Well, I'm a World War II vet, very proud of it, and it's going back a long way now. You're talking 60 years. So I'm going to have to strain my brain just a little bit to kind of reflect and remember some of the things. Getting back to my early childhood, I was born and raised in Chicago during the Depression. So a nickel back then was a nickel, or even a penny was a penny. And you just scrounged for whatever you could get. I was born and raised in a rough section of Chicago on the west side. We'd always hang out at the playgrounds. You had every ethnic group you can imagine there, but everybody got along well. They all took care of their homes. Thinking back, let's see, I can remember when I was just a kid, during summer vacation, you'd pick up whatever jobs you could get a hold of. And we kind of got the bug, a buddy of mine, and as far as the Merchant Marine, because everything was patriotic back then.
Sure.
I mean,
what year is this about?
This would be, oh my golly, that would be probably 42, 43, somewhere around there, I guess it was, yeah.
So the war's been going.
Yeah, the war's been going, and everybody's really gung-ho for the war, you know, like all the young guys are. You appreciate being an American, and the flag meant something back then, and your country meant something back then. It's changed a little bit now, but I still respect it, and I always will. We had clambered on to a couple of artificial birth certificates and went down and got in the Merchant Marine. They would that was just on the Great Lakes only. They would go up to Conneaut, Ohio, Two Harbors, Minnesota, Gary, Indiana. There were big ore boats back then. And some of them were oil and some of them were coal. My buddy and myself got to get on one that was the J.P. Owens, and it was coal. So what you did, you worked down in the big boiler room, and they had giant doors like your door on your house. You'd open up two of those, and you'd just feed the coal in there with a big shovel, and then you'd pull the ashes later on because you were just a peon then, and throw the ashes in a big bunker, and they go over the side and into the lake. That was pretty darn interesting.
How hot was it down there?
It wasn't too bad. You in a T-shirt, you'd be down there in a T-shirt. And I remember going through Lake Superior. You could see the mast sticking up out of Lake Superior, and they said that Lake Superior never gives up its dead because the water's so cold. But you could see all the big masts sticking up when you'd sit up on top of the forecastle up on the big ore boats. On the ore boats, when you were loaded, you were like maybe 8-10 feet out of the water. When you were empty, you were up there 3-4 stories high. Wow. So it was really, really an experience. You'd sit up on the bow and just kind of watch everything that was going on. It was a real experience. I guess that's when I kind of got the bug, maybe as far as you know, the water and maybe getting into the Navy. After that, let's see, we graduated from grammar school. This was during summer vacation that we were on.
What grade were you in about?
Oh, it's probably in 7th, 8th grade, something like that.
That was grammar school.
Yeah, that was grammar school.
Okay.
And then after I graduated from grammar school, the war had been progressing along pretty good. We're pretty much in touch with it, and all the young guys are adventurous. You're really gung-ho for our troops. And I went to high school probably for about a week or two.
Which high school did you go to?
I went to Austin High School. That's out on the west side. And I just couldn't cut it. So my sister had just got married, and well, I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit here. My buddy and myself went down, and we both had birth certificates. Mine was a little hairy. It didn't look too good, so the ink eradicator didn't work too well on mine. And they turned me down, but my buddy got in. And I was really jealous of that, so I thought, well, I've got to do something because I really want to get in the service and do my part. So my sister got married at St. Thomas Aquinas out on the west side, and after the wedding, I was walking back through the altar, and there were several baptismal certificates on the counter. So needless to say, I clombered onto a couple of them, brought them home, and did some real tall talking to Mom and Dad, telling them that, you know, they wouldn't send me overseas if I got in until I was about 18 years old. And so I kind of snowed them on that pretty good. And I said I'd get a good education, I'd learn a trade, and the whole 9 yards. So my dad signed, and we went down to the Navy recruiting office on Plymouth Court down in downtown Chicago, and signed into the Navy, and that was it. Before I knew it, I was up at Great Lakes going through boot camp.
And you were 16?
Yeah, I was just 16 then. And they didn't know it. They thought I was 17
right.
Because we fixed up the birth certificate. But went through boots up there, and it was a new experience. I went through boots with a lot of Southern guys, and it was a new experience because I had never dealt with any of those guys before. I got along somewhat with them, some of them I didn't. From there, we were shipped down to Camp Bradford down Norfolk, Virginia, for amphibious training. I remember...
now, amphibious training, in this instance, means just ship to shore. Is that correct?
No, amphibious training means learning to operate LCVPs and LCPRs, Higgins boats.
Landing craft.
Landing craft.
Right.
And they're stationed, I mean, your landing craft is on an LST, up in the divots on the side, and then there are nets when they go over the side. But learn to operate those, and I thought that was real challenging. It was real fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was adventurous, and I really enjoyed it. Let's see, we went through the training down there, the same with the rifle range and the whole 9 yards, just swimming and things like that. I remember, and at that particular time, I was a non-swimmer. So, yeah, and I was pretty petrified of the water. We got in a great big giant drill hall, and I remember there was a 3-story tower. It was like 60, 65 feet high. And you had to go up from tower to tower, I mean from platform to platform. And there were several guys that kind of passed out, and they'd hand them down. I remember getting up at the top of that thing, and there was a guy at the bottom with a big bullhorn. He'd holler out, "Next man!" All you could hear up at the top of that was, "Next man!" I thought, well, they're not going to leave me drowned. They had big cane poles that they'd shove to you. I thought, well, they're not going to leave me drowned here, so I have to go off. I got to do it. So you cross your legs and fold your arms, and off you go. You hit the bottom of that thing, you're battling like crazy, especially being a non-swimmer. And they poke the pole at you just before they figure you're going to drown, and you get out. But anyway, I got through that. And every day it'd be a new adventure. You know, you do your rifle training, 16-count manual arms with the old Grand rifles that they used to have back then. What were they? I think they were 9 pounds something back then, 9.5 pounds. And it never failed. You'd get up to about 13 counts on the 15-count manual arms. Somebody would goof up, and you'd have to start all back over again. So anyway, we got through that and did our training. I volunteered one time for UDT, that's the Underwater Demolition Team. And I stepped out with a couple other guys that were a little bit older than me. And I remember the old bosun mate come over after a few minutes, and he says, "Larry, let me talk to you, kid." So he took me in the back and said, "Hey, listen, why don't you come back in another year?"
Right, especially when you can learn how to swim,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That'd
yeah,
help
so,
a little bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, why don't you come back in another year, kid? He says, and then give it some thought. Because at that particular time, there weren't too many survivors on the UDT.
Right.
It was like your SEALs and your frogmen.
Sure.
So anyway, from there, we picked up our ship in Evansville, Indiana. A lot of hoop-de-doo, you know, the band's playing in the whole 9 yards and your sea bag and everything. And you had first time on an LST, you know, that it was going to be your ship. And we sailed it down the Mississippi River.
Is that right?
Yeah, down the Mississippi River.
Oh, be darned.
At that particular area, that's where they made the PT boats that Kennedy used to be on, the
Uh-huh.
wooden PT boats,
Uh-huh.
and the LSTs were made right there.
Okay.
So we got in there, shipped down to Mobile, Alabama. Went on a shakedown cruise out in the Gulf there, over to Algiers, and then from there we went down to Gulfport, Mississippi, out through the drink out there, and then
Algiers, Louisiana.
Yeah, Algiers, yeah,
Yeah.
down Louisiana, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in New Orleans, yeah,
Uh-huh.
Louisiana. And then we shipped down through the Panama Canal, and then we hit some of the islands, Pearl and the Marshall Islands.
So you went to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you went to Hawaii from there.
Yeah, from there we went
And
to
you
Hawaii.
landed in at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, in
And
Pearl
what
Harbor.
year is this now?
Oh, golly, it would be, oh, man.
44?
Early 44.
Early 44.
Early 44.
Okay.
And then I remember we docked right next to an ammunition ship that had just been blown up. It was an LST. And all it was just leveled. There was nothing.
So the Pacific Fleet was still coming into and using Pearl Harbor,
yeah.
but you could see some of the remains, or
Yeah.
what had happened, the devastation of the fleet then, or was that fairly cleaned up?
That was probably cleaned up. We didn't get a chance to see that.
Okay.
But I mean, we did pull up right next to an ammunition ship that had been leveled, and it was fairly recent.
Uh-huh.
It was an accident, I would imagine.
It had blown up there, or they'd come back in?
Pardon me?
It had blown up
It
there?
had blown up right there.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that,
Wow.
so it had to be an accident.
Right.
And that thing pretty much leveled it. And from there, we went. We got Liberty there for a few days, and went to Dole pineapple juice. And I can remember the pineapple juice coming right out of the fountain. You could drink it right out of the fountain.
That's fine.
From there, we went back on ship, and then we went out into the Marshalls, into Enowetok, and you could take a silver dollar and throw it right across Enowetok. Everything was devastated. The palms were all gone. You could look down into
These
water.
were little atolls that were out there, small little islands?
Some of the small ones, yeah.
So what rank do you have then?
I was just a fireman deuce, fireman second class.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the...
And what's your job then aboard ship at that time?
Aboard
So-
ship then, I was in the boiler room. We would keep your boilers going, and as far as having the steam for the ship and for the evaporators to make fresh water out of salt water.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting, and I could handle it. You know, everything went really well.
And how many hours would they keep you working?
Oh, I think you'd be on 4 on, 8 off, 4 on, 8 off, like that.
Uh-huh.
It'd go pretty much like that.
And how many guys on the ship, maybe? How big is the ship?
327-foot long, 60-foot beam, 60-foot wide. And we had probably, our complement, I think, was probably 160 guys.
So Ron, so you went all the way from, did you come from Mobile all the way to, you went through the
Panama
Isthmus
Canal.
of Panama.
Yep.
You stop in there? Did they
No,
give you
we-
some liberty?
we-
No, you
we
stayed
couldn't-
aboard
couldn't
ship?
Yeah, just went through the canal and through the locks, and it was an experience
Yeah.
watching it, yeah. And then from there we went overseas, you know.
So from there you went to Hawaii?
Yeah, from there we
How
went to
long did that
Hawaii.
take?
Oh, golly, I'm just trying to think, going through the Panama Canal, probably took us 2 weeks to get there, I suppose.
2 weeks to
Yeah.
get to Hawaii?
Oh, maybe 10 days,
Uh-huh.
somewhere around there, yeah.
How
Going
was
through
that
the
Pacific
Panama.
Ocean? Was it smooth, or was it pretty?
It was big. You run into rough weather and things like that. You know.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, it was an experience. It was great.
Had you got your sea legs by then? or
Yeah,
were
yeah. You get your sea legs after a little bit. You know, on the LSTs are flat bottom.
Right.
So when you go through a lot of rough water and the surf is real tough, you just bounce around like a rubber ball. If you took a rubber ball and dropped it, that's the way you bounce on the deck.
Uh-huh.
Just like that. But and then on the way going over, we got out into the islands, and we did a lot of practicing with 20 millimeters and the 40 millimeters. That's all we had on our biggest gun on.
So those are automatic weapons?
ACAC, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they were the biggest we had was 40 millimeters. They were quad 40s and twin 20s, and I was assigned. I was a gunner, a pointer they called them back then, on the twin 20s, and
So you go up on a turret, or?
No. You just get up there and they strap you in. There's a big harness here like this here, and they strap you in from behind and around the front. And then you got.
You're at the bow or
midships or
midship?
wherever they have.
Wherever you have them. Okay.
I was like back aft, midships a couple times and up forward also. And then we had drones go over and we'd practice shooting the drones. A drone is a plane that's operated mechanically, where there's no pilot in there. You don't have to worry about it.
That's
you
good.
Shoot it down, yeah. And then they'd have tows also, where a plane would pull a great big tow behind it. I can remember I was back aft, and it's probably the second time we had a tow job. I blew the cable off. Blew the cable off the plane.
Good shot.
Yeah, so it worked out pretty good. Yeah. And that was an experience. But getting out into the islands, I guess if that's where you want to go.
Sure. Well, we just want to kind of get a sense of where you're going with this.
And underway, when you had rough weather, the boilers, you had a tough time keeping the boilers going. There were Babcock's and Wilcox boilers, and sometimes they'd be pretty tough to keep them running. You'd have to shut them down, and you'd have to start them all up over again and stuff like that. But for just a young kid, I mean, I had it down pretty good. I didn't run into a problem. The only problem I run into one time, we'd been overseas for quite a while, and we were just dead tired, just dog tired, because we were sleeping like maybe 4 on and 4 off and 4 on, 4 off. And the boilers were running low on fuel. So you have to call up on the phone to the fuel depot up above and get fuel for your boilers. So I called up, I said, okay, load up the boilers, and there was a great big tube there where you watch the boiler fuel fill up, and I just kind of flaked out and I fell asleep. Next thing I know, the alarms are going off all over ship. It was the fuel oil was flowing all over the deck up topside, and I secured that, and they shut it down, and it was a pretty good reaming after that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can only do so much sometimes. You fall asleep, and that's about what it amounts to. I can remember on Guam we had that beach party there, and there was still a Jap tank right up on the beach there, and we crawled all over that thing, and it had been fairly fresh, within the past year or so, I suppose. And Guam was quite a place. That was the first time I ever saw a B-29. There was trenches right alongside the beach where we were at, and there was an airstrip there. And I remember we crawled over into the trench that was right alongside the airstrip, and a couple of B-29s came in. I thought, wow, I mean, how can something that big fly up in the sky? So that was a big thrill.
Right.
A big thrill to see a B-29. So I knew what it was when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I knew what kind of a plane it came out of then, so I was familiar with it. Let's see, from there it was probably turning into...
So you get reports about how the war is going?
Yeah, we did.
All along, and you kind of get a sense of where things are at. Do you know really where you are in the world when that's happening? And
no, you really didn't know where you were going. Nobody told you.
Right.
But when you got there, like when we were on Guam, they said you're in the Marianas, you're on Guam. So we knew where we were at.
Okay.
And
you know how the war was proceeding?
No.
Nobody would tell you?
You didn't hear much.
Radio?
Well, you'd hear something on the radio. What we did, we'd get Tokyo Rose. And
really?
Tokyo Rose, it was a great program because the thing is, she'd play music from not just particularly because I was from Chicago, but they'd play music from back on Michigan Avenue and places like that. And I can still hear her saying, now you guys, we know where you're going, we know where you've been, and you married guys, your wife is going out with your best buddy right now or with somebody else, and she'd really try and make the guys feel bad. And your girlfriend, that Dear John letter you got, she isn't going to see you again.
Right.
She isn't ever going to see you again.
Right.
So she tried to make you feel real bad, but she did bring you wonderful music, and
what were you listening to?
It was a touch of home. Oh, they used to play Making Believe, and Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night of the Year, and back that time you'd grab a bottle of Coke and you'd pour peanuts in it, and you'd have peanuts and Coke, so that was a big deal back then.
And who was your favorite singers back then?
Oh, golly, I really can't remember. I used to like a guy they call Frankie Lane.
Frankie Lane? I know Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie Lane.
Great voice.
I talked to Frankie Lane.
Did you?
Yeah, and he was a good guy.
Bing Crosby?
Yeah, and they'd play, let's see, To Each His Own. and Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night of the Year, and Always, and things like that.
Classics.
Fly the Ocean in a Silver Plane. Dean Martin used to sing that one.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, it was wonderful to hear that kind of music. Brought back a lot of memories of home, you know, and
Sure.
things like that. So, but she knew what was going on. She knew where you were going, and she knew when you were going to get there, and she told you.
She
that.
would call out your
she-
ships by
yep,
name?
Yeah,
or?
she'd say the 3rd Fleet, or Halsey, or the 5th Fleet, wherever you're at, the 1st Marines, or the 101st Seabees. You guys are going to be landing on Saipan, or you're going to be landing on Iwo. And she knew exactly where we were going.
You were where, and we're there waiting for you.
We're going to be
huh?
waiting there for you.
Yeah.
You're not going to come off of there.
No.
You know, you're going to buy it. You're going to buy it right then
Right.
and there. So it was nice listening to it. And when we started to head to Iwo, it would have been the latter part of February, because they started getting into Iwo probably the first week or two, 10 days into Iwo Jima, and we got in there the very last part, the tail end of it, just the very tail end of it. And I remember when we got in there, we had already been going over. There was a lot of floating mines, and out of our flotilla of 6 LSTs, we were the one that always went back. We probably had 140 or 180 of them up on a conning tower of mines that we blew up. You'd go back, and they were ugly looking things. They were big old rusty looking deals, like a porcupine with a big shaft coming out of the sides of them
Right.
and stuff like that. And we'd blow them up. Some of them you'd sink and they wouldn't blow up, and some of them would. And they were dropping those by air.
Well, the Japanese dropped those by air.
Yeah, they dropped
So
a lot.
they
Yeah.
could stay current with you.
Yeah, so yeah, and
Right.
then the current would float them all around, and there was a standing order that you got a steak dinner if you spotted a mine. If you were the first guy to spot a mine, you got a steak dinner. So a lot of the guys would be up topside as much as they could looking and stuff like
Good.
that. Yeah.
Whatever works.
Yeah, whatever worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chow was good.
You have a lot of canned food.
No.
Did they have frozen food back then?
Geez, you know, I really don't know.
Uh-huh.
The old famous SOS. It was
Right.
toast and whatever.
Chip beef.
Yeah, chip
Yeah.
beef, yeah, and then Spam was a big deal. You don't want it, I don't ever want to see another can of Spam.
No.
Spam with ham. They have doctored that all up different ways, but the chow was pretty good all in all, and I really missed the milk, because powdered milk was
Terrible.
it was just like drinking chalk water.
Right.
But the rest of it was pretty darn decent. You know, you couldn't really complain compared to what some of the poor guys. We headed for Okinawa, and on the way going over, we had just about got over there. That would have been April Fool's Day, April 1st, in '45, and
You're getting a little salty by now, huh?
Oh yeah, you're pretty salty. Yeah, and we were really loaded. We had a lot of guys on ship. Like I say, I mean, we were way over complimented as far as troops and stuff like that. You know, that we were hauling. Underway, I would be in the boiler room, and if we had an air attack, then I'd be up a pointer. I'd be pointing on the 20 millimeters.
All right, tell us about an air attack, or any air
well,
attack.
Close to Okinawa, we started getting, we traveled, we had DE, destroyer escorts, and destroyers along, you know, in our flotilla, with cruisers, and they'd go for the man of war. They wouldn't bother a real lot on the LSTs, because we were pretty hard to sink, and we weren't a man of war, so it wasn't a real notch in their belt, you know.
Right.
But we'd get up there, and the planes would be flying around, and mostly they'd go for the man of wars. But I mean, we got a chance to do some shooting at them and stuff like that, which was really kind of cool. And you know, being a kid, you're just adventurous, so you think, no, nothing's ever going to happen to me. I'm going to take this sucker out, you know.
And so these are Zeros that are coming over?
There were Zeros and Baker planes. When we get
What's a Baker plane?
A Baker plane is a suicide plane that they strap a Japanese a Gook flyer into, and it's dropped from another plane. In other words, there's no landing gear. There's no way they can ever get out of it. So what it is,
Is there
it's
a motor
suicide
in there?
plane.
Or are they just fully?
I think they were like propelled. I think they just dropped them, and that was it.
Right.
Yeah, and it had a locking cockpit on the top of it, and they'd go for the man of wars. You know, they'd try and sink them, and they'd just dive.
Did you
right
ever
in 'em.
see one of those hit, Ron?
Yeah. There was one that probably maybe 300 foot away from us. There was a destroyer escort, the Stark. went right down the stack and blew it right out of the water. I mean, went right down, because we picked up a lot of guys from there on. We threw the nets over the side and got a bunch of guys out of the water and got them on ship and stuff like that. And we'd been getting into Okinawa, and before we even got in there, we were going to get the small boats going off the side and taking the troops into the beach for the invasion. And a mine hit our back aft on ship, blew the laundry right apart, and killed 4 guys. And I can remember there was soap suds all over the place, and you know, and we lost the guys. And but we still had to go in. It was going to be that morning, and that happened like it was still dark. And
so you're waiting for the...
So yeah, we're waiting for okay to get going in.
Right. So those were typically done during the mornings, or...
Well, yeah.
By and large, huh?
Yeah, when you get a little light in there, yeah.
Right.
And they said they thought it might be a piece of cake going in. It all depends where you are at on Okinawa. Some of them just kind of skated in, and some of them it was a lot rougher, you know. But we had the nets over the side, and I had my Higgins boat. I was like a coxswain, they called him, an engineer on a small boat. I'd drive the Higgins boats or the LCVB boats into the beach with the guys inside of them. And
how many guys would you bring in at a time?
Oh, geez, I don't know. We could probably put 10, 20, 30, 40 guys with our gear.
You packed in tight?
Yeah, just packed in there. And I remember the second time, the first time actually in action, when you see somebody get hit, it's a memorable thing. You know, you're just really scared. I was so scared. My knees were shaking so bad I could hardly. I'd reach down once in a while and grab my knees just to kind of hold them still. And we were going into the beach, and there was a ship fitter. I can still remember his name. His name was Len Feste, and he got hit right next to me. I don't know what hit him, but there was a big splatter, and he went down. And I remember.
So you're taking fire both from the beach and overhead?
Coming in. Mostly it was just coming out towards us when we were going in, because they didn't bother us a real lot. They'd come over and strafe the small boats going in once in a while. But I mean, you were more worried about stuff coming at you from getting in. We got into the beach and dropped the ramp. You didn't want to drop the ramp where the water was deep, so the guys would drown. So you had to drop it. You had to get in fairly close, so you'd like to hit that ramp right on the beach,
right,
so it would hit the sand, so the guys wouldn't have to.
And they could get out of there running.
But then it was tough for you to back out,
right,
because the water, you know, there was all kinds of debris. So we got unloaded, and there was a pharmacist mate, a couple other guys that got hit on a small boat going in, and they stayed on the landing craft, and we started to back out, and I pulled the ramp up, and I backed out where the water was deep enough. The next thing I knew, something might have hit the bow door in the front. Anyway, the water was pouring in. So Len Feste, he was tore up pretty bad on the side, and a couple of the other guys had caught something, whether in the arm or leg, I can't remember. But we jumped over in another small boat, an LCVP, to pull right alongside of us when we were trying to back out, and we figured our Higgins boat is going down. It's a loss. There's no way you can stop that. So I remember getting on the small boat, and everything is just a mess there when you're trying to back out and go back for another load and get back to ship. Anyway, we backed up, and I can still remember that Higgins boat running underwater. It had gray marine diesels in it, and that just kind of blew me away that thing was
chug-a-lugging down there, huh?
Just going. But we were getting out of there, and we got back to ship. And normally, I would pick up another load, but I didn't have a boat to pick a load up with. So they said, get up in GQ, you know, get up and get on your pointer. So I relieved the guy that was on the pointer at that time. And what we did, we pulled up right next to a water barge. It was had a big picture of Dagwood on the side of it.
I remember.
Yeah, it had a big picture of Dagwood on the side of it. And the water barge was full of water, and we got strifed, and something happened. One of them went for a cruiser or went for a DE, and they hit the water barge, and it blew the water barge up. And at that time, I was on a pointer. I was firing, and when that thing blew up, a piece of shrapnel flew up, hit the magazine, caught me in the hand, in a couple other little spots, and the blood just was spurting out all over the place. It was I remember it was a warm, sunny day, and I went like this with my hand, and the blood was just spurting out of there, and I didn't know it was my hand, and it went in my eye, and I thought I got hit in the face.
Right.
And it was just kind of coagulating. So I was just about passing out, you know, so I just got real weak. The guys unstrapped me, brought me down to sick bay, and threw me up on a table up there, and they wiped off my face and said, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with your face." And they look on the deck, and there's a big puddle of blood there, so they lifted my arm up and stitched up my hand and made me feel damn good.
Good.
Because I thought, you know, hey,
That's
young
right.
kid, you know, you're wasted, you know, your
You can
face is
see
going to be
and
gone.
hear and smell.
Yeah, I could just, and you could even taste it, you know, because it was in my mouth. So anyway, you stitch you up, and you're back up there. You
Right.
know, that was it. And then it just kept going, and you'd work 4 on, 4 off, 4 on, 4 off, 4 on, 4 off, and that went on for quite a few days. I mean,
So these guys are just hitting the beaches continually and bringing up munitions and
Yep. Then you
support.
just get in as close as you could, and then when it started to secure the beach, then the LSTs we pull right into the beach, and you drop off. We couldn't drop our anchor off because we didn't have anything left on the back of it. But we got going. It didn't goof up our screws. The screws are what an LST has twin screws, like 580 horsepowers on each engine, and it didn't goof up the screws, but it did tear the anchor up and blew the laundry away. But we could get into the beach, but we'd have a hell of a time getting back off. So we got into the beach, dropped the bow doors, and then unloaded your half tracks and all your equipment and jeeps and stuff like that, whatever was on there. And that was pretty much it. Then we were there for probably till, I'm thinking maybe end of April or something like that, or in middle of May or something like that. And it started to calm down a little bit, but that's where the Navy lost most of their ships, right there at Okinawa. That was a big naval loss right there as far as suicide planes and stuff.
suicide
like that.
planes.
Yeah.
How about torpedoes? Not too much?
No. On the way going over, we had a lot of sub contact.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of sub contact. We never did see any, but they were close, and they wouldn't take us because we weren't worth it to them, you know.
Right.
But so there was a lot of contact there, and saw some two-man subs there. There was a couple of two-man subs, Goop two-man subs, and from there we headed towards. We were supposed to be a decoy and go into a place they call Sasebo, and it was a big harbor. And all around the harbor, they had giant coastal guns. So whatever ship would have pulled into that harbor, they'd have blown you right out of the water.
Right.
We'd have just got slaughtered. But we were supposed to be a decoy going in there, and the main invasion was supposed to go in further on down the beach. Of course, what was it, 14th? The 14th of August, 15th of August, we heard the war was over. And, you know, it just seemed, well, doggone it, you know, you were glad about it and everything. And the older guys, they were really elated. And then that night, you blew off all the yak-yak. It was like the biggest set of fireworks you ever saw in your life, you know. And from there,
So the word just spread?
Yeah.
Or how
word
did
just
you
spread.
find out?
It came over the radio on
Radio.
ship, you know. It said, "Hey, troops, got an enlightening message. Everybody's going to want to hear. The war is over."
All right.
So that was it. And of course, back here in the States, everything was big time, you know, VJ Day and
Sure.
the whole 9 yards. So you didn't get a chance to see that. But then from there we went in. We were flat bottom, like I said, and the man of wars couldn't go into Sasebo. That's Nagasaki, southern part of Japan, southern Kyushu. And what we did, we had orders that following day to put on your dress whites. They were going into the beach to pick up the 18th. But we had went into the beach with our officers, and they met with the Japanese officers on the beach. And I remember there was nobody in or around Sasebo at all except these here officers. And I remember we, while they were talking to them, they went in a big factory. And they talked to them. We jumped out of our small boats and went into a couple of the factories around there and looked around. And it was, I can still remember like they had lunch tables, and the coffee cup was still sitting there in the little bowls and whatever it was. So whenever they got out of there, they just took off like right now. You know, they were gone. And let's see, before that, they had dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. I think that was about
August
I think
6th.
that was about the 9th.
9th?
That was the 9th of
Okay.
9th of August in 45. So nobody ever took any radiation readings of us whatsoever. Yeah. Then they brought the officers back on our ship, and they went up to the officers' quarters and they did some talking. Then they went back in. We stayed there for a few days, and then we headed over to a place they call Hirawan and Curry. Hirawan, right at the, in order to get to Curry, you had to go through these here channels. And there were still mines in the channels. And I remember right at the base of an island they call Hirawan, there was a big Japanese cruiser there. And it was all camouflaged up. The back part of the deck was concrete. That's what the suicide planes used to take off on.
Uh-huh.
So, but it was all torn, it was all just blasted to smithereens. What happened, some of our Navy pilots caught it and they spotted it right, it was right next to the island. They had their anchors out, and one of the planes caught it right in the bow, and the two anchors just kind of tore it open like a can opener.
Ooh.
And we went through the conning tower and the whole 9 yards. It was pretty stinky on there, you know, and there was bodies on there and stuff like that.
Right, still.
And I remember the concrete deck. You could see the rebar coming up through it where they had dropped the bombs and just blasted it away, but it wasn't going anywhere. So it was a lucky spot that some of the naval pilots caught it right there. From there, we went right into Curry, which is a giant naval base and big industrial. They'd have cruisers, light cruisers, hollowed out right inside of a mountain. And that's pretty hard to believe.
Yeah, it is.
And they had rail cars where they had submarines that they made right inside there, and they'd run them out right out of the mountain, right on rail cars, right out into the bay. So you could drop all the bombs you want, you wouldn't be touching them.
Right.
And I remember when we pulled into Curry Bay, there was just several Japanese man-of-wars all around, or flat tops and man-of-wars all around there that they had caught and blasted them and sunk them. Right, but they were right along, what really surprised me, they were right along the edge of the beaches, right along the edge of the shore. They were trying to hide them.
Hide them.
But, so they took those out, and then there was a giant, oh, golly, like in a big steel mill where you'd have all the superstructures up above it, and it'd be like a great big, dry dock inside, just loaded with submarines. Just loaded with submarines. A pile on, it was like you open a cigar box, and you could see all the subs piled on top of one another. And I guess the pilots had caught some of those in there and just kind of stopped them from ever being used and anything like that. And then right down the bay, we anchored in the bay, and the bay started filling up with a lot of different American ships and things like that. And we would go on Liberty.
So you're permitted to go in now.
After we got in there, we were permitted to go into Curry on Liberty and things like that. And that was a fun thing too.
So what, you're not in your white to go in? You'd be
no,
in...
it was well, we call it Dungaree Liberty.
Right.
You know, you just had your chambray shirts on,
Right.
your dungarees and your boondockers. And
did they have a limited area that you could go into, or
well,
kinda...
they just tell you to stick close, you know, and whenever the ship was coming back, you had a certain time, like 16:30, you'd have to be back, and they'd have the small boats there to pick you up and bring you back to ship and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, that went real good for a while. We were there for quite a while, and right down.
So you're in there and actually going into town.
Yeah, you're going right in town. Yeah.
Now, so what do the Japanese think when you're walking? You're the first Americans they've ever
Yeah,
seen,
right. Yeah, you'd go into town, and after a little bit, they came back down out of the mountains, and at that time, you know, being a young kid, they had never seen anybody with kind of lighter hair and blue eyes. So I would have 15, 20, 30, 40 people just following me and my buddy around, you know, and they'd point at your eyes, you know, and some of them would go like that to you, you know. Yeah. And, you know, you felt like you were some kind of a ruler king. And it was interesting.
What were they wearing?
Oh, they just have kimonos on.
Kimonos?
And those little wooden shoes with the little deals that come down. I forget what
And
they
the
call
women
them.
were
Yeah.
out, or just the guys?
Yeah, no, the women and the guys and everything like that. And I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but from Curry, we went down the channel and we went into Hiroshima. That was about 4 miles down the channel into Hiroshima. And I'll never forget the first time we went into Hiroshima. Some of the people had been coming back down out of the hills, and their homes are nothing like ours. They'd have a cement slab in their homes, and they had a safe on it, and that's what they'd keep all their valuables in. And I can remember looking right through town, and all you'd see would be these here cement slabs with all the debris. All the glass was melted, and all the vegetation was gone. All the rubber was melted off of any of the vehicles. All the windows were out of any of the buses or any of the vehicles that were there. And it was just devastated for maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 miles around or whatever it was. But in town there was a great big round building. I can still see the great big round dome on that thing, and that was a bank. And that's the only thing that kind of survived, with a couple other brick buildings. But I mean, it was all blasted out. But I could still see that one sitting there. And all of your, over there, the power poles were like girders. And they were all bent about maybe 25 feet up, 30 feet up, all in the same spot. And they were all just bent down. And I can remember just walking through town, you know, and you'd see rubber all melted, and no, like I say, no vegetation. And I remember when they were coming back down out of the hills, walking in town, where they were just all kind of gathering after they'd come down out of the hills. I can remember it was seeing this one guy. It was like you took a blowtorch to his face, like a melted candle. It was just kind of pus and everything, kind of sagging down his face. He was all pretty wasted. There was a lot of people like that with a lot of scars on them, and oozing scars, oozing things. But the thing is, you have to take it into consideration that, you know, Truman did the right thing, because there would have been millions and millions of American lives lost. I wouldn't be here today if he wouldn't have dropped the bomb. What it did, it stopped the war, and it made him a believer. And it just saved millions of American lives. So it's something that had to be done. At that particular time when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, I think there was a prisoner of war camp in Hiroshima, and I think they killed 200 or 400 American guys that were wiped out right at that particular time when they dropped the bomb. So, you know, August 6, 1945 was a memorable date, something that probably never should have happened, but if it didn't happen, there would have been millions of American lives.
Yeah, it changed the world.
It changed the world.
Yes,
it changed
it
the
did.
whole world. Yep, it definitely did. And from there, you know, we'd walk around town, and I remember I've got a couple of souvenirs from little kids and things like that. You know, you'd give them chocolate.
So there, people are starting to interact with you then?
Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, they would, when we first went in there, if you were a block away, they would be bowing to you when you were coming down the street.
Right.
But when we were leaving there in July of '46, not being salty or anything like that, some of them got pretty salty. You'd almost have to bump into them and knock them to the side so you could walk by. They knew they were
So that's the change,
Yeah,
huh,
that was
in the
the
year.
change. They knew they were protected in a year, yeah.
Right.
And on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, they wiped out a lot of guys that were drinking sake. They took syringes and squirted it in sake bottles, and the guys went blind. So they were still retaliating and things like that, you know. So it wasn't something that they were giving up. But you know, the majority of the people, they didn't have anything to say about it. You know, it was the higher ups that did
Sure.
it. Yeah. So let's see, from there, then we went up into, we stayed there for quite a while. I can remember going into Curry one night. We were at the mothership there, and we'd have all the small boats out on, they were all lined up alongside of our ship, and all tied up there rather than have them on their own ship, because that way they didn't have a problem with them taking care of them. So I remember me and my buddy, there was a big, coming off the side of our ship, there was a bit like a telephone pole, and on top of the telephone pole, it was flat. They had like a 2x6 going across it. And down below were all of these here boats just bouncing around in the water, you know, and they had a Jacob's ladder. A Jacob's ladder is a chain ladder that goes down off the side of there into the small boat.
Right.
And it bounces all over the place.
Right.
So when it goes up and down, a Jacob's ladder's bouncing. So me and my buddy figured one night, well, I think it might have been, golly, I forget what it was. It was, I don't know if it was Thanksgiving or something like that. Anyway, we decided to sneak in and go into town that night, and everybody else was restricted during the night. You couldn't be in town, but we figured, well, we could get away with it. So anyway,
Feeling pretty loose by then,
yeah,
huh?
feeling loose then. So I remember going out, walking out. You were walking right over the water. I mean, and it was choppy. The water was bouncing. It was cold, and there was a little thin cable that went across on the top with another stanchion coming up from it. You get out so far, and then you kind of saddle over the top of that thing, grab the Jacob's ladder, and you'd hang on to that Jacob's ladder, and you'd be bouncing back and forth, and the boat would be going up and down, and then you'd have to jump. Well, we'd jump in, and you'd land in that thing, and then we'd cut it loose, and we'd drift a while, and we'd start up and go into the beach. So me and my buddy, we both took our boats in. And on the way coming back, we were going through a channel. On the way coming back, I hit a big sunken log. Comes right through the bow door, right through the bow door. And I thought I broke all my ribs. I went over the side of the wheel on the top of there. I went right down on the deck, you know, and jump up. The water's pouring in there, and my buddy George C. pulls alongside me and says, "What's up, Rondo?" He's got a battle lantern there, just shining it over. I said, "I'm out of here." I jumped over to his, and we watched it sink. We get back to ship, and we had to be real quiet. I don't know how long it took us just to tie back in there. But anyway, a day or two later, a big all-nav came out. The boat I had taken in was off of another ship, and it was a captain's gig.
Oh, good.
It was a real nice rig.
Yeah.
A real nice rig. That's why I took it.
Inlaid.
Yeah, it was a real nice one. It was a converted Higgins boat, but
Yeah.
it was really nice. It was plush, and so there was a big all-nav came out. If anybody leaves the harbor, they have to check to be sure that no one is confiscated so-and-so's captain's gig, you know, his boat. So they never did find out what happened to it, and nobody ever said anything. There was only two of us that knew about it. So anyway, that was quite an experience.
That is.
And I was afraid to go down to sick bay because I thought I broke some ribs. I was afraid to go down to sick bay, but I was all black and blue all around there. And we stayed there for a while. Then we headed up the beach. We went up in Tokyo Bay, and kind of ironical. The night we pulled into Tokyo Bay, we went into the beach, and that bay is a big, tough bay. Tokyo Bay is. All the man of wars are there and everything like that. The big battle wagons and the Missouri and the whole 9 yards. And that night we got back, and we tied up our captain's gig to the back of the ship, back aft. Next morning we get up, it's gone.
Uh-oh.
It's sunk though. It sunk because it was so rough in the bay, you know.
Right.
So that was a big deal. It was kind of ironical. Two captains' gigs being lost in the same probably month or so. So from there we pulled into Yokosuka. It was a big Japanese naval base, and we pulled into the right alongside the big dry docks that were in there, and we could go on liberty. They had a big enlisted man's club, they called it. Japanese enlisted man's club, and it was, I can still remember, it was kind of an olive drab, and there was no place where you could get anything to eat once you went in on liberty on the beach. You couldn't eat any of their food because it'd be poison.
Really?
Yeah. The only thing we could eat would be like tangerines, but when the Americans took over, the Navy took over the enlisted man's club, they made hamburgers and things like that there.
Right.
So, I mean, I can remember those hamburgers. There's probably 1.5 pounds of hamburger in each one. It was so good. So you'd sit around there for quite a while, and then you'd wander all over the island and stuff like that. I remember we'd go in there, and sometimes you'd get a chance to stay overnight.
In Tokyo?
Yeah. Well, it's in Yokosuka.
Okay.
Yokosuka, which is just outside of
All right.
Tokyo. And I remember going through town. There was a great big giant department store. There was a lot of the places that had been bombed. But there was a great big giant department store, and we were just kind of walking along, and it was late at night. There was, I don't know, 2 or 3 of us, and we could hear something going, "Gonna take a sentimental journey, da, 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 da." And it was kind of in Oriental music though,
Right.
you know, like a guitar or a banjo or whatever. I thought, who is doing that? So we start going through this here big bombed out building. It was the Fiji building. It was a Fiji department store. And we started going through that. We get up on maybe the 5th or 6th story, and here there's some candles and some lights over the corner. There's a bunch of Japanese over there playing Sentimental Journey. So, and they could play Sentimental Journey. They could play You Are My Sunshine, because that's their national anthem. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. So anyway, we asked them to play different tunes, and they couldn't play too many. We were trying to converse with them. They still had their gear on. They were service guys, you know.
Right.
And the troops over there, they'd always wear these 3-toed shoes and the bindings around their legs. Tough little side busters. They could hike and squat for hours and hours on end. So that was pretty.
But just some enlisted guys just talking on both sides of the issue, huh?
Yeah. And then from there, I think the following morning we went into a great big temple that was there, and it was a giant temple with all gold and everything, just dragons and things like that all on the outside, and on the inside it was just beautiful, all teak wood and everything like that. And we got a hold of this here one group that was there and talked to him, and he said, you want to go down into the chambers down below underneath this temple where the service guys are buried. We thought, yeah, that'd be kind of neat, you know. So he opens up this big trap door, and all we had was like a battle lantern, you know, a couple of flashlight deals, and went down there, and it was dark and dank and real smelly, you know.
Right.
And they had all these shelves just lined up, shelf after shelf after, and on the shelves there would be pictures with a little sake bowl, and there would be flowers that had been there from years and years ago, all deteriorated, and there would be pictures of all their servicemen and all their loved ones on all these shelves. And the floor was all dirt, and it was cold, and we got down there and was walking along, and you'd be way in the back, and we got to thinking, I says, hey, suppose he shuts that door up there.
You're going to be...
They kind of waste us. Are we goofy or what? We haven't got a radio. We got nothing. You know? It was just me and another guy down there. So we thought, well, you know, we looked around for a while, and then we finally come out, and everything was okay. And I can remember they had this great big gong that you'd hit, and boom, it would go on forever. So that was really an experience on that. And let's see, from there, then we stayed in Yokosuka for quite a while. And then I was transferred off of my ship because my ship was going back to the States. And I felt really bad about that because you helped make the homemade pennant banner that they fly on the top when you were leaving. And you miss a lot of your buddies and things like that that were going back. So
they'd had enough points?
Yeah, they had enough points.
How'd that work?
And they had the age. Well, you know, if you were, 22 or 25 or 30 years old, you got so many points for that and so many points for being overseas and things like that. So it worked out. I didn't even come close to having enough points, because of my age. But after we finished Okinawa, there was a big. That was the main post office they had on Okinawa too. Well, we had a big typhoon that we were in. It lasted for about a week or 10 days. It washed some of the great big AO tankers, which are giant tankers, washed them like maybe a block up on the beach, which is hard to believe.
Right.
It washed out the post office. So in the meantime, I had written back. The skipper had talked to me. I had written back, and he said, if you want to go home, Ron, you want to get out, have your mom send something back showing what your real age is and stuff like that through the Red Cross. Well, that letter was lost. So he called me up in his quarters and said, hey, Ron, you're going to get a chance to see something that nobody in 10 lifetimes is ever going to see again at your age. He says, this is history.
Right.
He says, I'll send you back if you want. He says, but if I were you, his name was Ryan. He had about 28 years in then. And he says, I'll send you back, or else he says, I'll send you on leave over to St. Tao to a rest camp for 10 days, and then from then on you'll be back and you can sweep mines on ship and stuff like that, go up and down the channel sweeping mines. So I took him up on that and went over to rest camp over in St. Tao, and it was really enjoyable. Had my own rickshaw man, and we'd have rickshaw races.
Oh.
and the food was excellent then, because you were on the beach there.
Sure.
And then from there we went back and did some mine sweeping, and my time was drawing near to be able to get out. So transferred me off and got on a great big General P man, and it had there was like 12, 14 bunks high, thousands of guys on this ship. It was a great big cruise ship earlier in its day.
Right.
And I remember I was up on the top bunk because the guys, anybody who was down below, they'd have their helmets, and when the guys were heaving, you got a shower. So I figured, hey, it isn't going to bother me to sleep up there. I can always get out. So I slept up in the top bunk, and I didn't have to worry about anybody heaving
Right.
on me. And
Long climb, though, huh?
Yeah, long time. But you're talking crowded and hot and
Yeah.
stinky. So, but anyway, we got back into Frisco.
So you sailed from Japan
yeah,
and then
yep.
through Hawaii again?
Yep. Back just
Take
straight
a month,
straight
or
on through.
however long that
Yeah,
took,
straight
huh?
on through. I remember pulling into, I had never been in San Francisco. I remember seeing the Golden Gate Bridge and pulling into San Francisco. And there were still banner signs up, welcome home GIs and stuff like that. We pulled into the berthing dock along the side. And, you know, there was people cheering and things like that.
Still?
Yeah, still cheering.
What
stuff
year
like
was
that.
this now?
Oh, that would have been in 46.
46.
Yeah, 46, July 46, yeah. And there was still people around, you know.
Sure.
And it was just a big, giant base, you know, service town. I mean, everything was there. Everybody was there. And I remember first thing I wanted to get was a quart of milk. So we went into a store and I got a quart of milk, drank it, and about a block away, after we were walking over about a block away, I could hardly stand up. I got cramps so bad from drinking the milk. I thought I was having an attack of some kind. But anyway, got through that, and it was, and we all needed a haircut.
Sure.
So we saw this big sign there, barber shop. There was maybe 25, 30 barbers in this thing. We went into the barber shop and got our ears lowered. And when you're in there, they're asking you a couple of different questions. You know, you just getting back? And we said, yeah, we just got back off the ship. You know, we just come back from overseas. You want a little oil on your face? Yeah, sure. Yeah. How about a couple of days? We'll do a little of this. So I did a little. Hands us a bill. I think when we finished, I think it was about 12 or 16 bucks or something like that. And that back at that time, it was a lot of money.
Yep.
Because we were getting I think 78 bucks a month with overseas pay and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And so we thought, no, we're not going to pay this. We ain't got this kind of money, you know. So there was a couple of SPs and MPs out on the street, and they weren't going to let us out. But several of us walked out and said, we got a hold of the MPs and the SPs and said, hey, these guys are ripping us off.
Sure.
And everybody else in the place, they knew something was going on. Everybody else was getting a bill for like, some guys were getting a bill for like 25, 30 bucks. So
They got the special treatment,
Yeah,
huh?
so yeah, they got the special treatment. So the SPs came in and they got a couple officers in there and said, hey, you can't rip these guys off. And he says, oh yes, we can. So there was a couple of salty old boatswains in there, and the guy says, hey, let's just take the place apart. You know, there was probably 50 of us in there by that time. And a couple of the guys up in front says, you can't do that. He said, you want to see it? And so the SP said, we're going to leave.
Right.
These guys are on their own. Either that, you make an adjustment here, or I don't think you're going to be open anymore.
This might be it,
Yeah,
huh?
this might be it. So anyway, they broke it down. I think it was $4 or $5 or something like that, which was still a lot of money. But anyway, so that was our first rip-off coming back to the States. And then we'd walk up and down the streets just oogling all the girls and looking at them, and it was mighty fine seeing them.
Yes.
Yeah, it was nice to see an American girl again. And we just kind of wandered around and did our thing. And I remember I brought back some souvenirs. I had a couple of Harry Carey knives and several other items and things like that. I got a Duke flag, and I remember when we got there, they said, now if you have any contraband, they called it contraband at that time, and they said if you have any contraband, you're going to have to throw it in this great big bin here, because we're going to run your sea bags through the X-ray machines, and
Right.
if we find something in there, it's going to delay your discharge. So I thought, well, hey, I went this far without it. It took me a lot to get it. I'm not giving it up now. So what happened, a lot of the officers were 90-day wonders. They'd just come in after the war, and they would have been collecting those souvenirs and bringing them home themselves.
You
so
bet.
that would have been theirs. So a bunch of us got together, probably 50, 60 of us, everybody kicked the x-ray machines through one night, so they couldn't x-ray the
Oh,
sea bags.
that's it.
So
You've got it together
yeah,
now.
so
huh?
everybody got it together, and next thing you knew, you were on a train coming back to Great Lakes, and getting into the discharge center, and it was a pretty fast shuffle. I remember the officer said to me at that particular time, he says, "Hey kid, you want to hang on to this here $10,000 policy? It's going to cost you X amount of dollars a month. You don't need it, do you?" Talked me out of it. I wish I'd have kept it, because the thing is, that would have been a $10,000 insurance policy I'd have
Sure.
had, and you earned the damn thing too.
You
know.
bet.
And to this day, most of the vets that are still around have their policy. It's paid for itself 10 times overfold. They get a
Little annuity every month, huh?
annuity probably every year or something like that.
Mhm.
It started out, I think, with $80, and ended up with $300-400 a year they'd get back on $10,000. You know. So anyway, that was kind of a bummer. And getting out of the service and get home, and everything is so strange looking to you.
Yes.
You know, and
your mom and dad were still there?
Oh, yep, mom and
Same
dad were
place?
Yep, same place. Yep, mom and dad were
That
still
must
there.
have been
Yeah.
seeing it in new eyes, huh?
Yeah, it was. And back then they had little flags that they kept in the window. If it had a gold star on it, that means that you were killed in action. If it had a silver star, you were wounded. If it had a blue star on it, you were in the service. And you know, every window, just about every window, you'd see a star in it. You know, whether it was gold or blue
Right.
or silver.
Right.
And Mom kept it in the window all the time,
Yep.
even when I was home. And then you know, it was a big thing back then, where you'd wear your uniform for like a week or 2 weeks after you got out. You know, you're proud of it. You know, and I remember going over to the old neighborhood. You know, over to the playground and stuff like that. You had your blues on and your bars. You were real salty. You know,
Sure.
And seeing some of the guys, "Hey, Ron, you know, where you been?" So what you were doing then, all of these guys, there was a few of them had gone in, but not very many of them, and because they were too young.
Too young.
And then some of them were starting to go in then.
Right.
You know, but I mean, so what I was doing, I was kind of playing catch up. You know, trying to get familiar with what happened when I was gone and where everybody was at and things like that. That went along pretty well, and I remember, like I say, the big thing is, you know, the guys are all real wild about their girls.
Sure.
And I remember I had been over in a real nice part of town, and the first girl I had met, her name was Shirley Taylor, and I was tying my shoe on a fire hydrant, and they pulled along in this here, I think it was maybe like a 46 Ford Club Coupe, which was a sharp-looking car
You
back
bet.
then.
And brand new.
Yeah, brand new. And she was in there with a couple other girls and another guy. She says, "Hey, sailor, can I help you tie your shoe?" I says, "You bet you can." So anyway, I got real well acquainted with her, and went with her for quite a while, probably a year or so after that. But I mean, you were still checking them out. And from there, then I thought, well, you know, maybe I should try and get a diploma, go back to high school, because that was kind of the thing, you know.
Right.
I probably went to Shores High School, to the vet classes they had there for maybe a month or two. I just couldn't hack it, you know. It just didn't seem right to me.
Right.
Okay, and then after that, probably had 52 jobs in 1 year. You'd work a week at one place, and if you weren't the boss, you'd quit. Or if something just didn't seem right to you, you'd leave, you know. And then I met this cute little blonde, which later turned out to be my wife, Mary Jean Eckwall. And her dad, she was about 15 and a half, and she was still in high school, like in her third year. And I can remember she was a photographer for the Austin High School paper, and I'd see her at the football games, and she'd take pictures of me. You know, I didn't even know her then, but she had pictures, and she says, "I remember you." They used to wear their Levi's with a white shirt outside their pants and moccasins and bobby socks.
That was it. That was
Yeah,
the style.
that was the big thing. And then the girls would wear those. Some of them would wear those mini skirts, and if they looked good enough in them, and then the other ones would be those big skirts that come down with
Uh-huh.
poodles on them and
Sure.
things like that, and that was the style back then. But yeah, I went with. I was introduced to Mary. I had met her at a place they call Charlie's. It was a little ice cream parlor, and back then you could play the jukebox, believe it or not, for a nickel.
I believe it.
Yeah, for a nickel. And it was Cherry Cokes and Green Rivers, they used to call them.
Green River.
Yeah, and she was in there with her girlfriend, real pretty gal, Doris McHale, kind of a. She had an Oriental look to her, but she was an American gal, real pretty, dark brown eyes and dark brown hair. And Mary was typical blonde, little blonde Swede, blonde hair, blonde eyes. I mean, blue eyes, blonde hair.
Right.
Nice figure.
Right.
And we'd sit in there, and I remember Doris was saying, "Now, Mary, you better look out for Ron. He's been around a bit. You got to be careful of these sailors, you know." And she was trying to talk her out of going with me.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, we went together for quite a while, and well, not quite a while. We ended up getting married after a bit. She was, as a matter of fact, her dad was an old wood butcher, carpenter, Swede carpenter, and he got me working as a carpenter with him after a bit, and then we ended up we got married. Mary was just turning 16.
Right.
We got
At the
married.
local church.
Yeah.
Where'd you
it
get
was,
married?
Pardon me?
Where'd you get
It
married?
was St. Ferdinand's. Yeah, it was a big Catholic church. And my brother-in-law and my sister were the maid of honors and our
Good.
people. And
Make your mama happy.
yeah, everybody was pretty happy. And then of course we had our first baby. Mary was 16 when we had our
Oh,
first
boy.
kid. So we started from there on. Ended up with 5.
Wow.
So after back at that time, if you had a small child and you were married, you had a tough time. Nobody wanted to rent to you. You had a tough time trying to find a place to live because they didn't want any babies. They didn't want any kids. And I remember we'd rented a couple of basement apartments. I can still remember chasing the mice around, but that's as good as you could do. You know, you couldn't get in a place. And I had, like I say, several jobs. And Mary she had a part-time job for a while until we had the baby. And then I thought, you know, we really have to get a place to live, you know, where we can be together.
Sure.
Because she can't go home to her folks, and then I can't go home to my mom and dad and live with them and still be married. So they had veterans projects. They were Quonset huts back then, and they were $32.50 a month, $32.50 a month. And you shared that Quonset hut with another couple. Now, there was a wall in between.
Right.
But you really had to have a waiting list, and the waiting list was like 2-3 years to get in on. But Mary's dad knew one of the guys in the veterans projects that was the head guy. So he put the word in for us, and anyway, to make a long story short, we got into a Quonset hut. And it was like a castle. I mean, it was like a castle getting into your own place. We, what was really nice, one of the guys had moved out, and they used to have a 55, and it was cold in them places.
Sure.
Not much
That's what I was
insulation.
thinking.
Yeah,
No,
it was cold in them.
In Chicago,
And
it's
you had an oil stove in there, and you'd have to go out with a 5-gallon bucket of oil, fill it, bring it back in, no matter how cold it was, because you couldn't keep the fuel oil bucket in the house, it'd smell the whole place up. You know,
Right.
it'd smell up the whole place. So anyway, one of the guys moved out, and he had some copper tubing. And that was a big treat. And he said, "Rondo, if you want this copper tubing, you won't have to go outside and get a 55-gallon drum outside, and you can pipe it into your oil thing." Well, that was like seventh heaven. I mean, we ended up getting that done. And your living room was a combination with your kitchen, and then there was a little small shower in the bathroom there, and then there were 2 small bedrooms in the back. And we slept on a single bed, because that's all we had at the time, the 2 of us. And then we had the kids, the baby in one of the other rooms. So needless to say, your family started growing from there, sleeping in a single bed. But I thought, well, a couple of the guys in the projects were firemen and policemen. I thought, well, you know, it seems like a pretty doggone good thing, you know. So I got some information on it and found out about getting on the fire department because I
Okay.
thought it'd give you time off and you could work on your days off. So I thought, well, I'm going to go down and take the test. So at that particular time, there was a lot of vets taking the test and things like that. And back then, if you were real physical, you passed the physical real good, and you had a few marbles in your head, you could pass the test and get on. But the main thing back then was if you were physical and you could be a good fireman,
Right.
and they'd ask you why you want to be a fireman. Of course, you tell them, you know, you want to help people and you want to save lives and you want to do your job. And one of the main reasons you were really taking it for was that, but then again, it was the security.
Sure.
So I got on a department, and that was really good because you had to put your year on while you were a probie, and then you were in. And as long as you didn't goof up, you were in solid. You know.
Right.
So ended up getting on a fire department back in Chicago, and got on a busy squad company, Squad 7, and we used to make anywhere from 15, 16, 20, 21 runs a day.
A day?
A day, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So you were always going. You'd go on anything from suicides to conflagrations, you know. And it was a good job. I loved it because there was a tremendous amount of excitement to it, and you never knew what kind of a call you were going
Right.
on. And you were helping people. You know, back
And this
then.
was in your old neighborhood as well?
Pardon me?
Same old neighborhood, or?
Well, you'd bounce around different areas. Like, yeah, it was pretty close to my old neighborhood. I got in, up on Waller and Lake there, and it was truck 29 and engine 96, and then I was down on engine 95 for a while and truck 26, and then you'd bounce around, got on Squad 7, and you'd do a lot of traveling, and it was, like I say, it was always exciting, you know. And the camaraderie with firemen is just like when you're in the service. You got to rely on the guy next to you, and that's what counted. So if you had a bad partner, you didn't feel too good.
Right.
So the thing is, you had to really iron things out and get to know somebody really well, because when you're in a tight spot, you better have somebody there with
Right.
you. You better have your marbles together so you can get out of there.
And
But,
a lot of those residential buildings were 5 and 6 stories, huh?
Oh,
and kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
old and
yeah.
ramshackle. And
Yeah, and factories in the same way, because the thing is, you know, when you go in a strange house, it's not like going into your house where you know what the stairs are, you know where this is, and you know where that is. You're going in a strange place. Structure fires are really tough to fight. And,
Right.
And you know,
And a lot of wood, of course.
Factories and things like that, you know, big buildings they're tough because you don't know. You try and just do the best you can when you're in them, you know, and
Right.
do the best job you can.
Right.
But the security was there. It really felt good. You had hospitalization, so you were pretty much covered on having your kids and stuff like that. I remember, golly, before I could get my insurance and everything like that, Mara was having my first son, Ron, and I had an old 36 or 38, 36 Pontiac, and the tires were so bald on it, I sold it for like $150, and when the guy went over to pick it up, the tire just went boom, and the tire flew out. And I don't even know if I had a spare tire to put on there, but it was really comical. But anyway, at that time, I think it was like $100 or $150 to get the kid out of the hospital. That's what it cost you to have.
Right. That was baby,
first
huh?
baby, yeah, that was the first baby, yeah. And that was the start of it. Then
Good.
you just kept going from there, and like I say, most of the guys on the fire department had side jobs. They were bricklayers or carpenters or painters or whatever, and you'd work on your days off, and everything went well. Everything went really well. It was a security job, and you enjoyed it.
Good.
It was a good life, and you know, sometimes you do a lot of things in your life that maybe aren't exactly right. But I had 3 good saves. They were all women. A little small baby. She was about 4 years old. Judy was her name. I kept in touch with her till she was about 18 or 19, and the other 2 were like women. So somewhere down the line, whatever you'd done, it was maybe not right. It didn't fit in with, you know, the big boy upstairs, with the Lord upstairs. He can recognize that, you know, you did your thing, and there's 3 people wouldn't be here if it wasn't
That's
for
right.
you. So it made you feel good, you know,
Good.
and stuff like that. And we probably went on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inlater calls. You know, back at that, in that particular time, they used to have an inlater box that was, it was like a trunk. It was like 3 big bottles of air, you know, your oxygen inside there and your paraphernalia. Anyway, what I'm getting at is 2 guys had grabbed that thing. By the time you got up to the 3rd floor to an inlater, you needed it. But I mean, we pulled a lot of people around, you know.
And that was to give them air when you were up in the fire. Right.
Yeah, well, no, that was to save people. You get an inlater call, you know, like somebody's dying of a heart attack.
Oh, I see.
Or something like that.
Okay.
And you'd be called out on an inlater, you know. So you'd get up there and, you know, some kids would have pneumonia, or, you know, somebody'd be old and they'd be sick and have diabetes and things like that. And you'd give them the oxygen and give them an orange or some candy and pull them around until the doctor got there. And I remember one time in particular, this one doctor, he was a young guy. Whenever you had an inlater call, we'd try and get a hold of him because he'd be there right away for you.
Right.
And I remember we had a call, and he'd be there, like I say, he'd come there with his bedroom slippers on and a T-shirt and a jacket and give him a shot of adrenaline and pull him around. And then they found out later he was not a doctor. And he'd been doing it for about 2 years. And they came back to us and said, what do you guys think? We had to sign some papers and things like that. What did you think of him? And I said, the guy's fantastic.
He's great.
Yeah, a great guy.
We'll have to find a place for him here, huh?
Because after that, I remember it was, you know, there was a lot of things you remember on a job that you bring home with you, just like the, you know, just like the coppers do and stuff like that. The firemen bring home a lot of stuff with you to your family when you come home off of a shift.
Right.
And it was like a Christmas Eve. I was working Christmas Eve. You'd work Christmas Eve if you couldn't trade off with somebody, and then you'd have your Christmas the following day because you were off. We'd work 24 on, 48 off. So I knew I'd be off for Christmas. Christmas Eve, we'd get in there, and this woman had a little baby alongside of her, and she was hysterical, and the Christmas presents were all up, and the house smelled real nice, the lights were on. It was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We went on an inlater, and we'd get in there, and she had this little baby. She had fallen asleep, and the little baby had had a pneumonia or something like that, had a terrible bronchial infection, and we put the inlater on the kid, and the kid had passed away.
Right.
So she had called a doctor 3 or 4 times that night, and the doctor wouldn't come. He wouldn't come. He wouldn't come. So when they pass away, then they have to come to make the final judgment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not up to us. And at that particular time, we didn't have any defibrillators, or we couldn't give them shots like the EMTs do and
Sure.
stuff like that. But we did the best we could. And it just kind of breaks your heart. You know, I got the doctor on the phone. I says, you got to get over her. You know, he says, how is she? I said, you'll see when you get her. You know, and the kid had been dead for probably an hour, but the mother was so exhausted, you know, she didn't know. She thought the baby was sleeping. So the doctor gets there and comes in. I'll never forget the guy. He's got his suit on. He's got his tie on. He's got his watch on. He's got his cufflinks on. The whole 9 yards. You know, all the time it took him to get there, and he wouldn't come there when she wanted him, when she really needed him. And he says, "How's the baby?" I says, "Doc, you should have been here." You know, I says, "Baby's dead." You know, and I didn't cheat. The mother didn't hear me.
Right.
But I told him on that. I says, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, you know, you guys take an oath. You should follow it." And I mean, boy, you know, and then you're going home to your kids, and boy, it brings a tear to your eye. I can still feel it now. But and then you know, there's a lot of hardships, just like in the service. You know, you lose buddies at fires and things like that. And whenever they play like Amazing Grace today, you know, and we'd put them up on top of the pumper and go down Michigan Avenue with them. And then you'd go out to the cemetery. Whenever they play that, boy, it just takes a chunk out of your heart. You know? So you can relate back to some of that right now, and it doesn't make you feel too good sometimes. But all in all, it's been a real good life. I lost my wife Mary to cancer back in '95. There's nothing I could do about it. Fantastic lady, and I didn't do much grieving with any organization or anything like that. I've got my kids, which are a backup, you know, and they're really good. I miss her tremendously. I've been going with a real super gal right now, Marla, and we we get along fantastically. We'll have 4 years coming up pretty soon, and for an old upper, I'm probably gonna get married.
No, good for you.
Down the line a little bit here. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we're engaged now, and she's just a great lady. We like to, hike and bike and cross country and ski. And the way I see it is, the older you get, the better shape you got to stay in, because that's the quality of life you have. And it's just been good now, And I think one of the highlights this year has been getting into a combat veterans group and meeting a nice bunch of guys like John here that's sitting alongside me. And I really respect them and honor them for all they've done. Even though we're generations apart in the wars, it's something we have a bind to it. You have to be able to talk to somebody that has gone through something like this in order to be able to communicate with them. You can't just talk sometimes to a civilian or somebody that hasn't been in it. They can't relate to it. But all in all, I'm very proud to be here today, and I really honor our flag, and I really respect it. And anybody that ever desecrates the flag in front of me is going to have to answer to me about it. And anything they talk about as far as the guys in the service, the same way. I really appreciate being interviewed with this, and
Well,
I don't know how it's all going to come down, but
it'll come out great.
I've done the best I can, and hopefully we'll be here for a good many years.
There you go.
Doing this.
There you go.
God bless all our troops that are over there, and thank you very much, John. I really
Okay,
appreciate
Ron.
this.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here. It's just it's a remarkable story. I hope the people at home that got a chance to hear this story are as thrilled and as impressed as I am.